My name is Tommy Bass. I'm the Livestock Environment Extension Specialist at Montana State University in Animal and Range Sciences. And I work in a variety of issues around environmental management and livestock and poultry production, as well as meat processing, food safety, and alternative production systems and marketing. And today I just want to share with you some background on a project that took place in the last 5 to 8 years about beef to school supply chains in Montana, an update on 2 of our case studies, and then for the second half, I'll be introducing Mr. Gary Hamel from Montana Department of Livestock to go over a regulatory review and offer some tips on what to look for on inspection statuses and sort of chain of possession as local beef moves from a processor to a school. Anyway, diving in, these are just some interesting statistics or bits of trivia about Montana. Of course, we know we have a floating population, a little bit over 1 million. Obviously, we're growing very quickly, particularly in certain cities. We have a vast land area, 4th largest state, behind Alaska, California, Texas, in some order. And on average, over the last decade or so, we've had a state cattle herd ranging from 2.5 to 2.65 million head of cattle and calves. That means on average, we have about 1.5 head of cattle for every resident in the state. I will just sort of on a somber note mention that our cattle herd is dropping quickly as producers without beef forage are having to liquidate, market early, sell calves and cows, and then just market those calves early too, due to the drought and feed shortage. There's some updated statistics on the number of school districts, and what I'm trying to do is just sort of draw some relationships here between people population, cattle population, and the number of schools. You see these different statistics here, but really the most important thing to think about is we have 826 schools in the state and about 402 districts, serving 145,000 plus K through 12 students. All right. A third of this population is concentrated in just a handful of districts, and really our 7 largest cities. All right. And then all the way down to the bottom, we have a number of schools, all the way down to just 1 student in a couple cases. But across this scale and size, there are successful beef to school procurement programs, right? From the very small schools all the way up to very large districts. So given those statistics, beef is a natural sort of part of the farm to school movement and farm to school programs in Montana. When we're talking about beef, we do break it back out to beef to school. Other thing to note about Montana, of those 2.5 million head of cattle and calves, we're primarily a cow-calf state, so that means we don't have a lot of cattle on feed being finished up to a slaughter weight. We export from the state about 1.5 million calves a year under this cow-calf production model. And then animals slaughtered in-state are only about 20 to 25,000 head of cattle. All right. So we think 1.5 marketable calves a year that could be held for a year and finished. Compare that to only slaughtering 25,000 head in the state per year. The majority of those are custom exempt slaughter situations, so that's ranch beef, family beef, slaughtering a steer or a heifer that you're not going to breed for family and friends use. All right. A slight minority proportion of that 25,000 goes into actual Montana consumer markets, so that could be restaurants, grocers, caterers, and institutions like schools. I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to say we have about 20 to 25 plants in Montana that maintain some inspection status that makes them viable partners at beef to school. All right, so Department of Livestock, from beef slaughter to a retail packaged product, they're probably supervising 20 plus plants. We have 5 USDA federally inspected plants. But as Gary will drive home this point, state inspected beef is completely wholesome and completely allowable to move into beef to school supply chains. And there are some other pathway is a little more convoluted, particularly for small communities that might not have access to full slaughter to further processed and retail sort of ready plant. So maybe Garrett can expand on that, where you might have a local butcher shop play a role as a node in your beef to school supply chain, doing that final processing to the types of cuts and grinds that you need in your school. This is a bunch of administrative gobbledygook, but it's just to say that we have an awesome project that concluded about 5 years ago, looking at different beef to school supply chain models. It involved school food service staff and managers, producers and processors, so that's ranchers and meat plant operators, and a variety of other stakeholders from food councils to PTA groups and different nutrition and health advocacy groups. And it ended up, started as a research project. We're a land-grant university, so our outcomes are always to do that research and share that information, right? So then we had outreach and extension. And here, years after the project, this is just an extension of that. So I wanted to highlight 3 school districts and then revisit 2 and sort of this where are they now format that you see on your agenda. And up at the top of these slides, we're going to note the model, the supply chain model. So this is a donation model. Dillon School District, Southwest Montana. Everyone can read these statistics. I need to probably save some time, but I'll highlight a couple. They served up to 600 meals a day at 55% participation rate, to give you an idea. The local beef that they procured were usually, if not exclusively, 4-H show animals that some local business, would buy from the 4-H club member, the prize steer and whatnot, and then they would donate that steer to the school, usually with the fee to have it processed. Okay, so those are your banks and your insurance agents. You go in those businesses, and there's the proud plaque of the animal they bought at the fair. And then toward the end of these school years, when they were running low on that local beef, a lot of local ranchers would fill in the need at the end of the year and other times of the year as well with donated cattle and maybe a donated processing fee. So from Dillon, they worked with the USDA inspected plant, Ranchland Packing in Butte, and they were just a third-party service provider. They processed these animals into separated frozen beef patties. Right, so they would slaughter the animal, make the patties, separate with wax paper. That's a big convenience factor for school food services. And then they would freeze them. And then they had a third partner, a state-inspected plant that was working with ranch lands as part of their supply chain and partnerships. And so silo meats out of Dillon at that time would be able to deliver that meat from Butte back to Dillon in a proper refrigerated truck with temperature logs and everything to maintain the chain of food safety and all of that. How did they use this material or this meat, this good local meat? They highlighted special local hamburger days. That was really primarily what they did. And they often had these hamburger days around a special event, like the days when the high school mentors would come have lunch with the elementary school kids and stuff like that. They'd have the local hamburger day. They also did what we call the advertising or menuing, where they might highlight a student in the district whose steer that was, or the rancher or ranch family that donated that animal for that day's meal. And then the food service director at the time said they were reliant on donations. They did not have the bandwidth or finances to manage another type of supply chain. So where are they now? Right now they are in transition, a little bit on hold. The longtime food service director has retired. I talked to the new food service director who, super awesome and exciting to talk to, but she just wasn't quite there to take on this new program, right, in addition to all the other important provisioning and nutrition design and everything else. So we're going to wait a little while and then reach back out to them. However, another one of our highlighted school districts is the Hinsdale School District, small school up on the High Line. I saw Patty Armbruster wandering around the halls already today, right? So small school, 65 K-12 students, the bottom of the school size statistics. 50 plus or minus meals served a day, so that's about a 75% participation rate. And this model is is what I call the negotiated fair price model. So they are working with Bear Paw Meats and Chinook to pay a fair but affordable market price for high quality local beef. Okay, and the Bear Paw Meats family, Carla, Dexter, Buck, and multiple generations of their family have a vertically integrated operation up there. So they have farming for feed crops, they have ranching for raising cattle, they have a feedlot, and then they have a meat plant. Okay, they also have a retail counter and processing plant, and a retail counter and specialty food store in Havre. But nonetheless, they can manage this whole supply chain, and they're bringing in local feeds best they can, locally finished, locally processed. So how does this fit in overall? This is interesting too, because there's a lot of farm to school programming, including a lot of food and fiber literacy programming, not just in ag ed, but across the whole curriculum. Bear Paw Meats delivers in their own refrigerated trucks. When I talked to Carla for an update a week and a half ago, she actually was leaving the next day to run this Hinsdale delivery in the truck. They're primarily doing premium ground beef and some roasts. All right. And then I already mentioned how integrated all into the curriculum this beef to school program is. And this is just a nice snapshot from a few years ago of looks like some chard here and some other greens and some peas in the background, but that's part of the Hinsdale school garden that Patty runs. So where are they now? Well, this Hinsdale relationship is going strong. Carlin indicated that they also had added 2 to 3 more small districts since we concluded the research portion of this project. They're also partnering with I'll get the acronym back into words, the North Central Montana Stock Growers Association, so a local regional chapter of stock growers and their beef to school program. And so working through that program, they're getting farther reach. Bear Paw Meats is. Okay, so we're stepping outside just that Hinsdale relationship. Bear Paw Meats reports steady growth and goals of collaborating with some reluctant schools. And I promised I wouldn't name them by name, and I won't, but they're just still trying to work on figuring out how to make it happen at some other regional schools up there, Highline in Northeast Montana. And they continue to focus on high quality finished beef and high quality burger cows, right? And I'll talk a little more about burger cows in the next case study. So out of the Flathead region, servicing several districts, but also looking at sort of some overall statistics. This is an aggregate for the schools that Lower Valley Processing out of Kalispell works with. So overall, the schools they work with serve 2,500 meals a day with about a 39% participation rate. The schools buy from Lower Valley Processing for select meals. Usually it's a weekly, fresh, never frozen hamburger day. All right. Lower Valley Processing has made this work from the pricing standpoint by buying cull cows out of the upper Flathead. And why this is important is the nearest cattle market at the moment is in Missoula. So if Jeremy builds relationships, Jeremy Plummer, the current generation taking over the plant, he builds these relationships with ranchers so that they don't have to spend a whole day, diesel fuel and everything else down in Missoula with cull cows. They can even hold them for a few weeks for Jeremy out at the ranch because they don't have to deal with that other mess. So Jeremy can pay them a fair price. They don't have to travel to market just to sell cull cows. And essentially, de facto, it's grass-fed beef. All right. So Jeremy processes, sells, and delivers to the different school districts, primarily, once again, burger patties, and then some special sausage and also some pork products. So special sausages might be lunch or dinner sausage, beef kielbasa, or something like that on occasion, and then a few pork products in the school breakfast program. Something else to note, at least before COVID, through the beef to school programs Lower Valley had, Jeremy was able to add or pay for a quarter of a full-time person. So he's able to hire a new full-time person, and just through beef to school, he's able to pay for a quarter of that person's time. He also bought a new, more efficient patty maker just to service schools, but it also helped him servicing bars, restaurants, and everything else. So some unique communication. School food service directors text Jeremy and tell them what they need their order to be weekly, and then he has, they work all afternoon and evening to deliver these fresh, separated patties, never frozen, and those are highlight days, and school participation and lunch goes up on those special hamburger days. Jeremy said, there's one loading dock he pulls up to, or there's all these kids before school skateboarding in the back parking lot, and they put down their skateboards and come out and load the beef for him. So I'm so excited about Hamburger Day. So finally, where are they now? They remain very active. They were seeing about 10% growth a year before the COVID school year. But they're also recovering from that, and they're in the employment crunch that Montana is seeing and much of the American West is seeing, right? So they are focusing on maintaining a high quality, productive relationship with their current schools. They're not marketing, they're not trying to add new clients right now. Just want to maintain those solid relationships. And they've also had to cancel some of their other extra activities like field trips to ranches and to the processing plant and educational tie-ins they used to do. So that's just on hold for now. But in closing, animal welfare in this model remains a pillar of their program for all partners. And what that is about is they're processing low-stress cattle that short drive, that work on the cattle truck all day, coming from across the state. Short drive to processing, good feed and water on site at the processor, calm down, they de-stress, they relax, and then they're processed into fresh burgers. So all of this sort of ties together in a variety of issues from animal welfare to fresh, obviously just local as its own benefit. All right, so some trends and themes, and I'm going to have to speed this up a little bit. Local beef is expensive. It's recommended that schools try and balance that addition, not on a per meal basis, because it blows your statistic out of the water for what you're $2.40 or something around that mark. But if you can balance it out over a quarter or a semester, strategically use your USDA foods, service supplier meats, and other products to try and have some savings and divert some money to local beef on special days in particular. For processors and producers, sometimes it's hard for them to meet that school price, so there might be some there that's important. These are some of the examples of how things are being used, how the beef is being used, mostly patties and roasts, but also looking at some opportunities to reduce that cost by using some wholesome extenders.
It'll be cool if we got like
These and spaghettis, sometimes a patty that's beef, and then also a vegetable additive. And then some different things I've worked with for research and outreach at MSU, Mission Mountain Food Enterprise Center, and then also some processors are mixing these things like lentils, mushrooms, some vegetable content into beef recipes. All of you are familiar with Harvest of the Month, I'm certain. It's an important part of helping support beef to school as well. I mentioned educational activities and curricular tie-ins. It's an awesome opportunity to talk about local economy, local culture, agroecology and the environment, animal science, all sorts of stuff. I mentioned the importance of branding on menus to give credit to those farmers, ranchers, processors, donors, and beef to school programs. And these are some of the trends and motivations we see, all right? Community pride and engagement came to the top of the list in our research project. This is social science research, really, so how do people feel about these things? Community pride and engagement was top of the list. Comfort and trust in a short and transparent supply chain. It's the same cattle they see out on the landscape and out on the range, right? And then their kids, their family are eating it. Food and fiber literacy, it's a fancy word for ag education and food education and just understanding where food comes from and who produces it. And then these were a variety of other perceptions. Perceived higher quality, perceived better nutrition, perceived environmental benefits, and animal welfare. In the sake of time, I'm going to bump over to a couple summaries. And I can provide this presentation to anybody online or offline who wishes. But here's an important statistic here. I talked about that big population of cattle in Montana. If beef was 1/3 of the protein in all the school lunches currently served, only 900 head would be needed to satisfy beef to school across the whole state. So if the whole state started serving local beef as 1/3 of the protein content in the current number of lunches served, you do that with less than 1,000 head. all right? Or 0.004% of the calves marketed in a year. And then there are many calls in the school supply chain as well. I'm gonna just have to bump on down. Here's just some barriers to overcome. And we're looking, at these different supply chains or models can help finding that negotiated price for premium ground beef. The donation model can work, and we're seeing that in many different ways across the state. Cull cattle savings, highly recommended. And then these extender strategies, so these are some ways to try and cross that cost barrier. Start small. Some schools just do like their sports banquets for both semesters, right? And then there's the once a week hamburger day, and then there's more local beef throughout the whole menu and throughout the whole year. But start small, build relationships, work with these nonprofits and parent groups, balance the budget with other affordable foods, and then finally, make sure you highlight that, bring that school lunch participation number up through these highlighted hamburger days where credit is given. All right, I'm going to leave this up for a second as Gary gathers his thoughts and takes over the second half. Then we'll do Q&A totally at the end. You can find out more about Beef to School by going to the Montana Farm to School website. It's hosted by MSU. There's a specific Beef to School link. We have some publications and guides and all sorts of stuff that's useful there. The case studies, how to get started, some tools and procurement worksheets to figure things out. If you want to know anything about this, Aubrey really takes the lead on current outreach. I'm doing some outreach, and if you're curious about the background and the research, then Dr. Carmen Biker-Shanks is your contact there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Hamel, and I'm the Bureau Chief at the Montana Department of Livestock for the Meat and Poultry Inspection Program. I'm a regulator, so it's not always fuzzy and nice when you're a regulator. But what I'm going to do today is talk about the Bureau, give you an overview of that, and I'm going to talk about the various forms of inspection that we oversee, and we'll talk about our relationship with the federal government as well. Okay, what is our mission at the Meat Inspection Program? It's to ensure that meat, poultry, and respective products are slaughtered, processed, and/or stored in Montana meet state and federal requirements for clean and wholesome and safe products. The Bureau was formed in 1987. And I promise I won't stay on the Bureau stuff too long. It can get a little boring. The services we provide enable local businesses to add value to Montana's livestock industry and spur economic growth. The federal government does have primacy in selling or processing of meat. So what that means is the USDA defines the rules under which meat inspection is to be carried out, how we operate, and so forth. The Meat and Poultry Inspection Bureau conducts the regulatory program in compliance with the Federal Meat Inspection Act, the Poultry Products Inspection Act, and the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act, which the state of Montana has adopted by reference in statute. This act does require that our inspection standards are set at least as high or equal to the federal standards. We run what's called in the industry an at least equal to program. There are 27 states in the United States that have a program. Montana is one of them. So services are carried out within the Bureau. I've got 24.5 FTE in 3 districts and 14 circuits. The current level of funding for the Bureau is in fiscal 2021 is $2.2 million and is split 50-50 with general fund and federal revenue to carry out the program. So what are some of the primary drivers? That includes the addition of new establishments and increases for the number of inspection days. So plants, they never seem to go backward. they always go forward. They need additional days of inspection rather than settling on just a couple of weeks. Once we give them, they're typically working those. So Montana, that one thing I should mention too is federal law prohibits the state of Montana and other at least equal to states from charging a fee for inspection services. So that is done free. The only time that we end up charging, which is consistent with the USDA, and that's on weekends, holidays, or in excess of 8 hours a day. We have a formula that we calculate based on inspector salaries, travel costs, those kinds of things that go into the formula, and determines how much of a rate per hour we charge those entities for weekends, holidays, and in excess of 8 hours a day. Okay, Montana partners with the USDA to carry out inspection services according to the Federal Meat Inspection Act. We have to carry out our inspection services in a manner that's at least equal to inspection services provided by the USDA. I did mention that earlier, but it's really important. We currently license 31 inspected establishments. Those are the official establishments, 25 federal establishments, 140 custom exempt operations, and 186 meat depots. And we do provide some inspection services to all of those except the federal establishments. And, you know, when people typically think about meat inspection, they're thinking about, okay, it's a slaughter facility or it's a processing facility where you cut the meat up. It involves any meat. You're processing any product that contains meat. Pasties are a good one out of Butte. There's both federal and state inspected pasty facilities in Butte. They process the meat into the pasties. Because they're using meat, that does fall under the Federal Meat Inspection Act. Our inspectors drive approximately 500,000 miles a year in total, going across the state and to various establishments to conduct inspection services. Meat Poultry Inspection Bureau also provides approximately 6,476 days of inspection throughout the year. So each inspector has multiple plant assignments. They have to go multiple times a week, sometimes multiple plants in a day. So that's what gives you the 6,476 hours of inspection, or days of inspection for establishments. Okay, now I mentioned official establishments with 31 of those. These are facilities that can purchase animals, perform humane slaughter, and sell the products of those animals, whether those are single ingredient cuts or processed into other items such as sausages or jerky. Official establishments that slaughter livestock purchase animals from local producers, then slaughter the animals under inspection so that the state market inspection can be applied to the carcass. Applying the state market inspection to the carcass is a big deal. Without that inspection, it is not allowed under federal law. If we don't operate in an at least equal to manner, that state inspection mark cannot be applied. So there's very narrow criteria for being able to apply that market inspection. So I want to make sure I drive that point home, that when you see that market inspection on a state product, it's a big deal. That means the facility's clean. That means they're processed humanely. The whole gamut of regulation. They've met that regulatory requirement. So once we observe the slaughter, we have to have an inspector there every day for slaughter. Every day they slaughter, the inspector has to be present and has to look at the animals from the time they're unloaded from the truck or sitting in the corrals to time they're slaughtered, bled, eviscerated, all of those steps that go into the slaughter process. They do a final zero tolerance check to make sure there's no foreign material, feces, ingesta, milk, anything like that on the carcass. So once they do that, that carcass is eligible to receive the mark. So fundamentally, inspection of product for sale ensures that the animals are slaughtered humanely. Animals that are slaughtered are not sick, are fit to be food for the public. This facility is clean and sanitary. Food safety protocols such as cooking, cooling, and packaging are followed. We do require HACCP plans. Those are hazard analysis and critical control point plans. If somebody's not familiar with those, it's basically a flow chart that identifies the steps that the plant are taking to ensure that that product is wholesome. As they go through those steps, they're making sure that any critical control points or critical parameters are met. So what that is it's an opportunity for a pathogen to enter that carcass or product at that point. So if it's reasonably likely to occur, they make that decision. And if it is reasonably likely to occur, they have to put a control measure into place to ensure that does not happen. So what are some of the advantages of an inspected facility? The product is eligible to bear the mark, which enables the product to be sold in any retail establishment or sold wholesale for further processing or sale in state markets. Inspected meat has a higher level of consumer confidence that the product is safe and wholesome. It allows local ranching families to add opportunity to add value to their livestock that they may not get through traditional livestock markets. Federal inspection may not be an option for some facilities. So there may not be a federally inspected plant close. You need to utilize the state inspected facility. The combination of inspection services and scientific sampling of meat products provides a line of defense designed to prevent illness due to pathogens such as E. coli, Salmonella, and Listeria monocytogenes. A private label can be used to market beef by approaching the establishment with the need for a label. The establishment then will work with the local inspector, and the label will go through our review process for compliance with regulation. Very strict requirements for what can be included on that label. The purpose of that is to make sure that the consuming public is aware of all of those ingredients, what kind of cut that meat is, where it was produced, and be able to trace that product back to the original source if there is a problem. So what are some of the disadvantages? Federal Meat Inspection Act does not allow state inspected product to be sold across state lines. That's one distinct disadvantage with a fully inspected facility, an official establishment. There is my colleagues in the 26 other states that have at least equal to programs are quite vocal about the process in which we have to keep that product within state borders. We utilize the same regulations. We apply them at least equal to. It's not same as, but it's at least equal to. So we may, for example, use a different method for combining some sampling. Whereas the federal government, if you need to take 20 samples, they will take 20 samples. And if all of the material comes from, if you're testing a food contact surface, for example, and you're testing one table because it's a small establishment, it may be divided up into quadrants, and then each of those quadrants sampled and tested, and then we can trace that back and know that it came from that table if it's combined. Custom exempt operations are the next type of facility that we inspect. We have 140 of those. Custom facilities do operate in a manner that's similar to an official establishment, but there is a key difference. Custom exempt operations may slaughter and process product But unlike official establishments that can sell the product, they can process custom product that's for limited use by the owner, members of his or her household, and non-paying guests, unlike an official establishment that can sell to anyone. They are not subject to animal by animal inspection. Custom exempt operations are, however, subject to sanitation requirements found in the Federal Meat Inspection Act and must prevent adulteration of product. We conduct custom exempt operations inspections twice a year. And that's, people think, well, it's a custom exempt. It's exempt from the law. It's exempt from the Federal Meat Inspection Act. It's important to know that those operations are not exempt. They're only exempt from animal by animal inspection and some of the other more detailed inspection services we provide. And we go in twice a year. And although the sale is mostly limited by their custom exempt status, custom operations with retail counters and further process federal or state inspected product for sales to consumers, hotels, restaurants, and institutions. So what are some of the advantages? Why would somebody have a custom facility as opposed to an official establishment? Well, there's more operations throughout the state, which allows more access to slaughter services. I'll tell you right now, slaughter services are becoming difficult to find. Most of my establishments that I work with that slaughter, although I don't have hard proof anecdotally, they're indicating that some of them are 2 to 3 years out, booked up for slaughter services. So it's significant. We have a capacity problem in that. Increasing capacity, and it's kind of a conundrum because increasing capacity means more employees, and right now most of the establishments can't hire employees. There's just not enough people wanting to work in that industry. So they're kind of against that wall, only able to produce up to what they have staff. Okay, you can utilize federal or state source material and sell that meat in a custom through a retail counter. You can utilize local livestock, smaller regulatory burden, because like I said, we don't look at all of the regulations, apply them to a custom. You look at a small portion of them. Custom slaughter operations can field kill livestock. If you're an official establishment, you cannot field kill an animal. That's not allowed.